Spotlight for everyone. There we go.
So welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. It's great to see everyone. I'm just gonna make, because we are right at 10 o'clock, so I'll just make a couple of super short announcements over the next 1 or 2 minutes, and then we'll get started. As you know, we are continuing with this series on the Lam Rim of the fifth Dalai Lama with His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama's gloss commentary. And we are also doing the song Recognizing My Mother, an experiential song of the view. So the second text is available for download freely. The first text is unfortunately only available for purchase, but you can find it, like here in Canada we have Indigo, Amazon, all of those kind of well-known booksellers. You can find it there if you're interested. So just in terms of programming, the literature circle, the book group, is going to resume not this Tuesday, but the following Tuesday. In terms of Geshe-la's highest yoga tantra teachings, they will be on the third Saturday of this month. So that means next Saturday, actually, and it will be Chakra Samvara. I will lead a Yamantaka sadhana on the following Saturday. And I think also Annie's Tai Chi and Lojong course is that next week, Annie, or did it start this week? You can tell people if
Next week.
It's next week. So this course will start, and she just got back from India, so this course will start next week. So those are sort of all of the activities that we have planned, and also the previous Yamantaka session will be up shortly. Just a lot of people in our community have been dealing with home issues, including myself, so we're a little slower. That being said, also, if you have written me an email, I think I've responded to everybody, but if I have not responded to you, please ping again. The last thing I want to mention, because I know there are folks who tune into the Sunday teachings from Europe, is that Geshe-la will be in the Netherlands for the first 2 weekends of May. So that first weekend, it will be the 4 Kadampa deities, Buddha, Shakyamuni, Tara, Avalokiteshvara, and Myowa or Achala initiation. And then the following weekend, he will give a 4-day course on the Buddha nature using Gampopa's jewel ornament of liberation and Tsongkhapa and Jetsunpa's commentaries as well. So that's kind of the plan for there. So I won't take up any more of your time. Please make yourself comfortable, grab yourself a cup of tea or coffee, and we will get started in 1 or 2 minutes. So welcome everybody. Just as folks trickle in, let me see, can you hear me clearly in this microphone? Okay, great. And we'll do a sound check for Geshe-la. Can everybody hear Geshe-la? Okay, wonderful. Yeah, great to see all of you. So first of all, Tashi Dele to all the Dharma friends wherever you are, and Geshe-la hopes and prays that all of your studies and practice are unfolding exactly as you wish and hope. So remember that as we gather together today for this to be beneficial, two of the main purposes for our gathering are the accumulation of merit and the purification of negativities. And because these are the two things that we need to have in place to be able to purify, to train the mind. So why is this? It's because the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas teach us that in terms of our experience of samsara, that karma or cause and effect plays a very important role in this. And we understand also that when we speak about karma or action and this being accumulated, after that accumulation, the potentiality of that karma exists as a latency within our mind. And so those latencies or those potentialities, those imprints, whether they are able to ripen, whether they are able to be cleared away, right? So the unwholesome and the wholesome, this depends upon our activities of accumulation of merit and purification. So of course those imprints or those seeds, when we have this in place, they can ripen, and then when the positive potentialities ripen in the most powerful way, then these unfold as positive mental qualities. And we understand that also, as part of this picture, then from day to day, we will start to see a change in our way of thinking, in our mental state. And so we see is that, for example, if before we go to sleep, we train our mind in this way to bring forth a positive mind, right? Konda dene nganso ni makungola diti gewe semchik kiena dene DJ la sebo chamas. So when we establish that positive mind before we fall asleep, this takes our mind into a wholesome direction. And then for the balanced time that we remain asleep, we will be accumulating merit and negativities will be diminished. Yep. So actually, the biggest sleep that we are going to experience is the sleep of are passing to the next life, right? Is the sleep of that death and impermanence. However, we understand that if we have practiced bringing forth a virtuous mind before our ordinary sleep, that this will be something very beneficial. Because if we bring forth a positive mind at the time of death, this prevents the negative potentials from ripening and helps the positive potentials activate as we go on our journey to the next lifetime.
다 니까 세나 만두 던지지가 배도 son스티가 배도 첨보요나 다세 템보 세게테 템보 수요소나도 다 못하네 대시 임바다 시워래 되어레스.
And if we develop these positive minds in a very stable way, what we'll see is that those positive mental qualities become more powerful, and then we will be able to establish a very stable basis for happiness in our ordinary lives.
다 던지지랜데 던지지자 다 레세아디 같이 뭐 이자 다 가디 이나요 코알 거라자네 되나 당한조 배도 문두 스타 디 솔로를 봐 어니네 진도 그건두.
But of course, we understand that as long as we remain just solely under the influence of karma, that we will only be able to continue to circle within samsara, even if they are relatively positive circumstances. So what we also want to do is to establish a path out of this cycle, out of cyclic existence.
다 코알 데비칼라 대시 다 칼레 럼바지다 다 대시 조야 메바 누가 텐데 메비다 대시실 로사요 이자 다 텔은 로게스요레스.
So what we want to do is establish those patterns to go from happiness to happiness within samsara and from lifetime to lifetime, and then eventually to be able to create a pathway for the lasting, stable happiness, which is beyond samsara.
다 대더니 레지보요레만 this 콜 레데 코 지지도 로하스 다 조조데 레데 보게
And so when we speak about karma here, right, it is not karma exclusively that is driving this picture. It is also the doer or the agent of karma. In the case of unwholesome, the afflictions.
다 녀무 메바조 가르생 안조 콘트로 메바조 가르 내가 메바조 가르생 안조 셀 텐데 칼레지 오시바레스 콜레라보면도 하스.
So when we say that we need to reduce and eliminate those afflictions, we need to get rid of our attachment and our anger, right? When we hear that, the mind might be immediately uncomfortable because that is a challenging task. How can we reduce those afflictions, much less get rid of them, right? They are so familiar to us. So immediately, this seems like a difficult job.
따따 야가 제라 간도 하고서라 따 야가 제라 대지 제세 인지 멘지 주야 수자 가마 쪼쪼데 다음에 하고서라 다음에 라야라 따보기 다음에 또비 시라 라야라 내가 잖아 강가 레라고 차거래 에서 땡데 되오지 요아레스.
However, right, if we look at the positive side of this picture, if we engage in selflessness specifically, if we are able to bring forth the wisdom realizing selflessness, we will not have to address each of the afflictions individually to eliminate, right? They can all be eliminated or diminished together.
다 던지지랜데 던지지자 다 간존 din을 다 따와 계셔 따와 아망인즈 계셔 깔이나요 쪼쪼데 다음에 간에서라 그건 단저그 소스 가르는데 되게 조시기야레스.
So of course this is part of the reason why in our topics for these sessions, one of them is this song of the view, and this song of the view is helping us to recognize how we grasp at inherent existence, how we grasp at the existence of the self, and how we can use the wisdom of selflessness, the wisdom realizing selflessness to overcome that.
어단에서 던지지 다때 같이 못노네 첨보 님치가 님보노네 님보디 있자 아니 시라 님보노 주주 tum바고 tum바니 주소서 다때 어다
And so it is said, in fact, that this wisdom realizing selflessness, we could say, is the very heart, the very essence of the Dharma. And that is why this sutra is called the Heart Sutra, and especially these lines where it says, form is empty, emptiness is form, have very deep meaning.
어따때 셜룰 깨자 마셔와지 이니 멘저 쇼비가라 가져터들 헬레진 소송걸지 nga tumbago tumbani ngago sen kaze tata jego don jugo then jise sono to kres.
So, of course, as we say, form is empty, emptiness is form, this has us thinking about that emptiness as an external object. It is more powerful when we turn that reflection inward and think, for example, I is empty or self is empty. Emptiness is self. If we do this and then we engage in analytical and placement meditation upon this, we can bring forth that very powerful wisdom.
Ta danzu mari ba ina yo ta shalo tere yo do yar tene zo so ngai lise atingol sonse de shigo yares.
So, of course, we talk about the ignorance grasping at the self, for example, of phenomena or of others, but the most powerful way, right, is to turn that and look at the ignorance grasping at the I, at our own self. Start with examining that.
Ta shira ya po ten zo shalo la ta yo do yar ten judo shara mani zo so nga do ani ngai li do me shia ta.
So, of course, this wisdom that we want to develop, this will understand the lack of inherent existence of all objects, but ultimately what we want to do first is turn that wisdom to look at the emptiness of the self, of our own I, that we call my body, and so forth.
Ta kepa do shibo tamba so sunga yare ani ngaro so yapo ta je chena danza mari be so rapa mombo chinganzo tende.
So the holy beings advise us that if we kind of just take a moment to reflect, then the coarser aspects of this ignorance grasping at the self are something that is kind of like, it's easy to begin observing them. Why is that the case? Because we have continuously been grasping at the self since countless rebirths within samsara, so it is a very identifiable pattern.
Lobe inyega loma lobe loti tembas kero chimbo jaga pen da kero chimbo chires.
Yeah, loso.
O ta shuloka So
Geshe is mentioning a story about a student of the great Vasubandhu. And I'm sorry, I don't know what the Sanskrit equivalent of his name is, but anyways, the Tibetan name is Lodro Thumpa. So Lodro Thumpa was somebody who was very easily able to Shloka Katsulo Karene Parjingido Kare. So he was able to very easily memorize like 400,000 verses of a sutra, right? He had this kind of prodigious memory. So why is this? It was because in his past lifetime, right, he was a bird that was sitting out Vasubandhu's room. And Vasubandhu was in the process of memorizing a text of 800,000 lines. Sorry, shlokas. Sorry, yeah. And so what would happen is the bird would be listening but would drift off about halfway through the day. So those 400,000 shlokas, the first half of the text that he had heard, these remained within the mind. So, these are sort of clear stories, like they are historical events that are told according to those beings who are wise and possess clairvoyance. But the point here is that if even a bird can establish imprints within its mind to be able to remember 400,000 shlokas, certainly we as human beings are capable of placing imprints in our mind. Yeah, so he realizes at first when you hear these stories, like whether they're believable or not, that might not be a given. But of course, in the Buddhist framework, we understand that these are, past events. Oh, I think we see his name there. So Marjorie was kind enough to put his name there of Lodro Thumpa. Thank you. I should have Lodro Thumpa lekig nang la kandis lagore chema. So Geshe-la said that that's Kedrup shirking his responsibility because this is an old story. And last time I said I would look up Lodro Thumpa's name, but Marjorie did it for me, so I'm off the hook. Thank you very much. Yeah. So we'll take a moment to place our body and our mind in a state of relaxation. So whatever good or bad thought arises within the mind, do not follow it. Just set all of those thoughts aside for a moment. And as we tap into the stillness, start to notice that this fundamental nature of the mind is neutral, it is equanimous. So as we tap into this nature of the mind, as we take a break from following thoughts, whether good or bad, what we'll start to notice is that this kind of stream of feelings, this stream of mental projections starts to fall away. Just like when a gentle breeze blows, the clouds obscuring the sun slowly float away. Think like this cloudless, vast, bright, and empty sky. In this way, the mind, freed of thoughts, is vast, clear, and peaceful. So we'll direct our mindfulness awareness first. Now that the mind is peaceful and relaxed, let us direct our attention, our mindfulness first to the body. So out of these 4 close applications of mindfulness, we'll start with the first. Close application of mindfulness of the body. What is the body like? What are the outer aspects of the body? What are the inner components of the body?
shilatabi, lilatabi, gala tsowato, nongi lilatabi, gala tsowa, ligate, melatabi, gala tsowan mundawa, dudumandu.
And let's connect that with the application of mindfulness on feelings. What are the feelings or sensations that emerge as we observe the outer part of the body? What are the feelings and sensations that emerge when we direct our attention inside the body? And are there any feelings or sensations that we experience apart from the body?
nga sadeate za chimbo sadeate shi li nong li raba tawa shinda tawa kawata wa ina yo raya do to.
And the next step of this is we try to see if there is a findable, pinpointable I or self on the outer body, the inner body, the coarser parts of the body, or the subtle aspects of the body. Is there a self that is findable?
Li nawato, li dewa la soba shunga yena nga dewa to nga nawa sin segiyari tene yena yo li taro kawata wa yena yo liga noni nga se ajiraya mandu sombachi.
When the body is feeling uncomfortable, we say, I am feeling unwell. When the body is feeling comfortable and at ease, we say, I feel good, I feel well. But yet there is no self or no I that we can find or pinpoint within that body.
Rungje sei na yo. Lida tonga zonji tane mate dere sombe lo ronji ji choba sonsi ji yarta te tende numa chemborendu sombata.
When we think of self or we think of others, if we think of this body, this physical form, on the basis of seeing it, we see there is me, or there is this or that person. And along with that comes this appearance that oneself or this or that person is inherently existent. But this appearance of inherent existence is completely mistaken.
Nese tindila tene kale kale ta ronji meba se ate ta siwoshi ba chine. Ane roje yozo ta deshil chagi sombachi.
On the basis of this I want to come to this understanding that all phenomena, including the self, lack true existence, so that I can develop that realization and lead beings to happiness. For that vast and unmistaken wisdom to arise within the mind, I will make praises and requests to the holy beings, to request them to please bestow their blessings. So we'll do the prayers, starting with the praise to the Buddha. Dömba chom de jun je ba ra chom ba yang da ba zo be song ge je ba dang sha su dem ba de wa she ba je den kem ba ke bu du we
Jawa Shakya Tupala Chazelo Chede Gyatso Jiho Tumba Chonden de Tejin Sheba Jachomba Yandaba Zobe Sangye Sheba Dan Shatsu Demba Deva Sheba Jiden Shemba Chebu Dewe Kalo Jurwa Lana Meba Ladami Namgi Tumba Sangye Chonden de Jawa Shakya Tubala Chazelo Chede Gyatso Jiho Tumba Chonden de Tejin Sheba Jachomba Yandaba Zobe Sanje Jeba Dan Shatsu Demba Dewa Sheba Jiden Jemba Chebu Dewe Kalo Jurwa Lana Meba Ladami Namgi Tumba Sangye Chonden de Bejawa Shakya Tubala Chazelo Chede Gyatso Jiho. Short mandala. So ji bege je me do ja je ja linzi ni de gyamba de sangye jindo me de bowa ge drogo nanda jin la je bar sho idam guru ratna mendala kam niryatayami. So refuge and bodhicitta next. Chedon Sogi Chenam La Jancho Bardu Dani Gyatso Chi Dagi Chenye Nibe Sunam Ge Jola Benji Sangye Jobar Sho Chedon Sogi Chenam La Jancho Bardu Dani Gyatso Chi Dagi Chenye Nibe Sunam Ge Jola Benji Sangye Jobar Sho Chedon Sogi Chenam La Jongcho Bardu Dani Gyatso Chi Dagi Chenyen Gibe Sunam Gi Jola Benje Sangye Joba Sho.
Ya ta du da ni ge shawa ni se ta den da da sto yo was da de
So, of course, we always mention the activities in the beginning and the activities of the end. So we have actually three components: the beginning, the actual session, and the conclusion. But we know that if the beginning and the end are not established properly, the actual session cannot come out well. Yeah. So we can think of the mind's balance using the analogy of a scale. And so if we have the wholesome on one side and the unwholesome on the other, we know that the unwholesome, when they're heavier, it's hard to work with the mind. And we can see generally our mental state, right? The heavier side of this scale tends to be the unwholesome states, actually. And so these negative or unwholesome ways of thinking, let's be clear, they are not true. They are not based on valid reasons, but due to habituation, actually, they predominate within the mind. And so the reason that we experience more problems than ease within samsara is partly connected with this. So what we want to do is take these causes and shift that balance from the unwholesome to the wholesome. And to do that, we engage in practice or cultivation, and we want the potentialities from that to be as powerful as possible. One way to ensure this is to make sure the activity is complete in the beginning, the middle, and the end. And so, this is not something that needs to seem like impenetrable or difficult. This just happens through bringing forth these positive ways of thinking, right, in Titi donda mendus de carisegi na yapo como son ti.
Me kale kawasono to gama. So ze yaga chocho sono to na tenen ni pa chega de go.
Right. So it's not the most difficult thing. It's through thinking positively in the most powerful and efficient way that those potentials, positive potentials, become more significant.
다 대원에서 야쇼 찔러 소가 디이나 nga sen데 소소 지보도 소소 야예 뭐 가시 지보소노 돈에 대대바이나 다대 중보래 뭐도 세도 대박 니네들에 뭐도.
So we also know, right, that our limited way of thinking, solely focusing or mainly focusing on the I or the self and disregarding others, that is not something that is either honest or realistic, really.
다 생인의 것에 토야 돼 롱제 요주로 다 대시 부수수바지 그건데 롱제 요주 강가 다 여봤다 그건데.
So what we need to do then is to establish a balanced mind that considers both self and others, to think that both self and others need to achieve perfect happiness, need to be able to reach true freedom or liberation.
다 대도 내가 간리어 버렸어. 니만냐만 소소하게 끼워 줘야 다 잘라 줘래는데 왔어.
And this comes from an idea that sees self and others in an equal way. And this is something that is just immediately identifiable as a positive way of thinking. Nimakare? It provides us as a means of achieving happiness from day to day as well.
용화를 찾아봐 이나 소소깔에 가서 깨져 주죠. 용화를 찾아봐 이나 강가파 샤와 레레 뜻이워래 되어res.
And if we establish this in the preparatory phase of the practice, then all of the other activities will unfold in a very sort of relaxed and happy way. So then in this way, placing the components of the beginning, middle, and end, we will proceed with the session. So in order to place the body and mind in a state of relaxation, we will begin with awareness of the breath. So just follow along the 9-point breathing with Geshe-la. Yeah. So cover the left nostril and breathe in through the right and then hold. Then cover the opposite nostril and breathe out through the left. And repeat this 3 times. Now shift the direction, cover the right nostril and breathe in through the left. Hold and out through the right 3 times. Place the hands in your lap and breathe in and out, holding in between through both nostrils 3 times. And as we continue to breathe in and out, as you exhale, think all of the unhelpful thoughts, feelings, energies are exiting the body. And as we breathe in, think we are breathing in the blessings and all that is wholesome. Think the body and mind are now at peace. They are even. They are relaxed. And think on the basis then of this piece, I want to be able to generate, to bring forth the most powerful virtuous mind possible. And this happens on the basis of considering ourself, others, all 6 types of beings within samsara is not removed from us, but very close to us, close as the dearest person to us. Think that all of these sentient beings with whom I am connected, they don't have an understanding. They lack the wisdom to see things as they really are. Because of this, they remain in this cycle, experiencing the 3 types of suffering. The situation is that if I don't bring forth this wisdom and this determination to help these sentient beings, then due to their lack of capacity to see things as they really are, they will remain from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime within cyclic existence, within samsara, enduring these difficulties. So think, may all of these sentient beings be parted from the 3 types of suffering. How wonderful if they were to be parted from those 3 types of suffering. I myself alone will lead sentient beings to the freedom from those 3 types of suffering. Bring forth compassion with that superior intention. In order to be able to lead beings efficiently away from suffering, I, myself, must actualize the state of complete and perfect Buddhahood, bring forth bodhicitta. I have as a basis this human rebirth, this human body and mind. Therefore, I am definitely capable of actualizing this enlightenment. Bring forth this courageous determination. So we'll pause there. Tambo Lam Rim, right? Yeah. So we will turn now to the Lam Rim. So Geshe is saying that actually this Lam Rim, especially because it contains like this very precious gloss commentary of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, it's actually quite easy to understand. And so when you hear it in Tibetan, for most of you, you won't understand what's happening, right? It's like, but it's a good imprint within the mind. But as I read it, really like kind of take a moment to reflect, because a lot of the things are things that you will immediately understand. So we will proceed directly. Nganso data rang re lamgi rimpar kebu chungjing Tsongkhapa. Jadanga. Yeah. Jadanga data rang re lamgi. Yeah. Take it. So we are on. So we are on page 115, the third line. Yep. Yep.
Sorry. Lonja ramba shivu chunji suka shivu chunga da tumoyo lonja ramba to shivu ndido tumoyo lonja ramba shi sumbali shivu chunji sosi lo ronsemba suji mes.
When persons of small or medium scope are now mentioned in regard to the stages of the path, what should be understood are the stages of the path in common with persons of small and medium scope, as we are not discussing the paths that are unique to small and medium scope persons.
다 밑에 지세 대질이라 버려왔. 나로서 토자대 아니 제가 샤말라도 많이 공부 지보요 말에. 하가 지보요 말에. 대이자 시부 중어돈 리지볼 다
So Geshe is saying that actually this is quite easy to understand if you know the vocabulary. So why we are saying common here is because the great scope practitioner, right, as he or she is practicing the small scope, they are not practicing the small scope exclusively. Similarly, when they are practicing the stages of the path of the middle scope, they are not practicing the middle scope exclusively. Right. Right. And sorry, I forgot one last part. So they're not exclusively aiming towards rebirth as humans or devas. They're not exclusively seeking to achieve personal moksha or liberation, right? Geshe is saying that this is not their final, right, object of attainment that they are aiming at. So, of course, the thing is, though, that for many such practitioners, they aren't going to be able to complete the entire path and actualize Buddhahood in one lifetime. Therefore, practicing components of the small scope is necessary to ensure favorable rebirths in the humans and deva realms to continue to practice. Likewise, right, practicing the stages of the path of the middle scope aimed towards liberation from karma and affliction is also important. However, it is the case that among practitioners of the small and medium scope, there do exist those who solely follow that of the small and medium scope. And therefore, in order to bring about maximum benefit to persons of high, average, and lesser intellect, training in the mindset of seeking higher rebirths is taught first. If it is taught how to achieve higher rebirths having generated that mind, those of lesser intellect have received exactly the Dharma topics that benefit them. And thus, according to the four thought transformations, one contemplates the difficulty of finding leisure and fortune, death and impermanence, karmic cause and effects, and the drawbacks of samsara. Having done these, relying on the spiritual teacher, refuge, and so forth, are attributes that follow later. I would say are topics that follow later. So Geshe said that, he's not sure that he would frame this as lower intellect, right? We could just say perhaps those who don't have the interest to study the great scope or the higher aspects of the path.
어다 예술로는 강해래도 가 멀리토 그도 있으니까 대지볼 답하게서는 또 되게 다 같이 요추래스.
So of course you may have people with that sort of limited vision, right? Like fearful of rebirth in the lower realms. I definitely don't want to be reborn in the lower realms, so I better do the things that are going to ensure a favorable rebirth as a human or deva, right?
어다 된디버지. 다시또 배반노로 비시 장조도 파메주 고소 온게 특이간에 지와고 변보 구리 이샬셰데 라메 주네 지만년베 공원에 파메냐와의 르동 통송아 버세 마루에서 많은 로기 봐서 게디 랜데 전노자 라파시 예니티네 롱 섬비 리송아 디리 절라 잡이 치테동 신중화동 달러르노네 아고사라와.
Yeah. So, in general, it is assumed that Tibetans either follow Buddhism or the Bön religion from a young age based on their birth region and the traditions of their parents. Before they receive Dharma teachings from a Lama, they learn from their parents about the hells, how it is wrong to kill insects, how they must recite Om Mani Padme Hum, and so forth. General presentations on virtue and negative actions, and karma and effect. This style of teaching the Dharma is cultural.
Yeah, so
Geshe said that's the pretty self-evident, no explanation required. So, excuse me. Alternatively, when giving a complete explanation of the vast and profound stages of Buddhism, as in Shantideva's Way of the Bodhisattva and Aryadeva's 400 verses, many opposing views are debated, and thus the style of teaching revolves around refuting others, presenting one's own view, and disposing of further objections. When the stages of the path literature is presented to them, the primary focus is on stages of easier practices.
Yeah. So
for some people, right, the Bodhisattva Charyavatara and the 400 verses of Aryadeva, within them are many sort of philosophical discussions and debate. So for some practitioners, right, it might not be immediately evident, like how is this relevant? Like, what do I take out of this? So Lam Rim, the stages of the path texts are not presented that way. They are presented in a way that can be utilized immediately, that can be actualized immediately.
Yeah. So
the Lam Rim texts in general are just, it's easier to take something out of them to practice.
대기 폐체 라마도 송지 터모 많이 변자와 예서 제타르 템바 대타르 이치바 샤와라 녀도 송지 셰바 공라 이마동 레시 송지체 치라 지체 뎀베 니바 디춘바 마토 나고 이제 존지 템바까지 제데 자와 첨보 이저 로라 마차와시라 신예 때서 치타 떼네메.
Many stages of the path manuals start out with a section on relying on the spiritual teacher. It is explained that in order to have a real practice of relying on the spiritual teacher, one must rely by way of two, thoughts and actions, faith in the guru and respect that remembers their kindness. To increase faith and respect, the unique connection between the guru and Buddhas is taught. It is impossible for the disciple to develop conviction in that, and for the Lama to guide a person in relying on the spiritual teacher, if the disciple does not first have a correct assumption that the kind teacher is incredibly important, even if they have not gained solid ascertainment through reasoning of what a Buddha or the Buddha Dharma is.
오다 페나 순지 콜로 바타 순요하라 와스
Yeah.
콜로 동보 콜로 바바 콜로 타마세네 콜로 바바 이나요 대세 잡이 깔다 콜로 버게 로스테 시세 도보이자 아니 콜로 솔라요 동보 예
Yeah.
동보 순지가 공부 세다 페르지 대세 자네라 요한도가 요하레스
The Barbadi. Right. So this we can connect with the presentation of the Buddha's sutras themselves, right? We speak about them in terms of the three turnings of the wheel: the first turning of the wheel, the middling turning of the wheel, and the final turning of the wheel. If we look at the discourses which are included within that middle turning of the wheel, we see that they begin, for example, with an explanation, Sangye Condensed
오다 순지 토나 다 그냥 계속 가려 요하레 니바치가 가려 요하레 대지 좋은데
of what is Buddhahood, how is that achieved, what are the benefits of achieving it.
그래서
Barbara.
오다 신지 전문 누지레스 또 페가 레게 용거도 와스
And you'll see that Shantideva's Bodhisattva Charyavatara mirrors this, right? The first chapter is a chapter on the benefits of bodhicitta.
다 페데 통차소나 다 세이나 다 코파 가빙원이 콜레까지 하지만 또 깔레카고 말아와스
So why do the benefits come first? The benefits come first because if one understands the value of what one is striving towards, it is easy to bring forth the necessary effort, right? This is why.
다 로르 그쳐도 돼요 다 로르 그쳐도 돼요 세지가 말아 로르 그쳐도 녜네 chen 로조 chen 세 망니 kel 쳐도 돼서 무드스 거 하레스
So, having taken that into consideration, we can say that the actual stages of the outlines of the Lam Rim, of the stages of the path, are maybe not presented in the way most effective for those who are perhaps those who are not so familiar with the Buddha Dharma, or perhaps those who are approaching the Buddha Dharma for the first time.
다 가르르세레 조신이 돼서 대저 lonso 가침보도 다 지레니레세는 용거야 아이자 콜리라오지 마이자 또 모니티도들 하면 돼.
So why is this? It's because in most Lam Rims, the first kind of main subject is the way to rely on the virtuous friend or on the teacher or guru. But for people who don't understand what Buddha Dharma is and its value, it's very difficult to start there immediately.
다 단다숨바데 동노지레 아니 손지도 전에 셈바샤지 내서 코로파게 타바샤지 대지 내서 가로지 하고 사게지라 세메 또 메나요 이제 세리 세메 또 메바세요.
Right. So Geshe-la said that here, it's speaking of the person even if they have not gained a solid ascertainment through reasoning.
Right.
So Geshe-la is saying that this solid ascertainment is, we would usually translate it as mental engagement. This is one of these 7 of the lorik, of the mind and cognition teachings. So what Sophie here, so Sophie, the friend, she's actually a friend of mine who translated this, and she's an excellent translator. What she is translating here is solid ascertainment. This is mental engagement. Geshe-la is being very clear that mental engagement here doesn't mean a pramana or a valid cognition. It's not that high, but it is something that is moving in the direction of a pramana or valid cognition. Right. So for example, we might have a doubt about emptiness. Is emptiness like this or like that? After we sort of clarify those doubts, we come to the beginning of an ascertainment, of a mental engagement with what emptiness is. Right. Right. So what happens is, so we start to have this doubt. We think that, okay, emptiness is maybe like this. We come to more of a refined understanding, a feeling for kind of like the contours of emptiness. Then we think, yes, that is emptiness. So we have this kind of ascertainment. Ah, I see that's what it is. So that is what is being spoken about here.
다 대용 공부할 때는 긴진 코니엘에 그 저선이라.
Right.
아니 코 참아 돈이도 배 세명을 안 그래.
So once that solid ascertainment arises, we just became very blue all of a sudden. Anyways, once that solid ascertainment arises, we think about it again and again. And as we do that, we can come to this pramana, this valid cognition, 100% sort of conviction and understanding of what it is. Right. So when we speak about pramana or valid cognitions, we can speak of sort of two types. The first of these two types is a tokparwa, is a conceptual valid cognition, a conceptual valid cognition.
단다 코 노아지가 때에 거 되게 요한테 또 돈이 또 요한에 재매 또 요한 이나 노아지가 단다
Chesang tokpalagire. And it's called a conceptual pramana or valid cognition because we have the pramana, the valid reason of emptiness correctly within the mind, but together with that, nangwa norju dabochiki nangore. Okay. But together with that, there is sort of an appearance. There is an appearance. Yeah. Right. So just to try to break this down using an easy example, say that you're sitting in your house. Think about rang tropogi yul chala dabochikwa. Right. So think about maybe there's something, an object or something that you find that you really enjoy in a friend of yours' home. So as you sit in your room, you bring forth a mental image of that object. Yeah. Right. And so when we say that there is that object, or perhaps they have a really nice computer, perhaps when they say there is that object, so we're thinking there is that object in their house in like a pinpointable way. But although we're talking about the object and sort of conceptualizing it in that pinpointable way, what's really happening is that there is an appearance, there is a mental image of that object arising in your mind. Yeah. So how is this different from the direct pramana, the direct valid cognition of emptiness? Well, we can think about, if you think about your eye consciousness and you look at an object in front of you, like those flowers in front of Geshe-la, there is an immediate sort of cognition of the object. There is nothing sort of in between it. That's a direct seeing of that. Right. So the mind is not like that. The mind does not perceive that object directly. What happens is the mind first has to give rise to an appearance or an image of the object. Then, once that appearance or image has arisen within the mind, we can begin to point at it. Yeah, So the Geshe-la left a loose end. He's like, you have to tie up the loose ends. I'm like, well, I don't want to make it up as I go along. So the difference then is we can think about that conceptual pramana or valid cognition as like that mental image of that object, and the direct pramana or valid cognition, then it becomes like the eye consciousness directly perceiving that object. This is the difference between the two. Yeah. So when we speak about things like past and future lifetimes, impermanence, and especially emptiness, because these are extremely subtle objects, there's no practitioner who's going to be able to see them as clearly as that object sitting in front of them on the table, right? It is only going to first come forth as a conceptual mind, as an appearance when one is thinking of it. So for so for both the hearer disciples and the bodhisattvas who are on the paths of accumulation and preparation, emptiness and impermanence are only being brought forth as these sort of conceptual pramanas. They are only being brought forth as these conceptual pramanas. Once those sort of aspects of appearance are cleared away, and one is no longer relying on the conceptual mind, but has that direct perception of emptiness, for example, then one becomes an Arya Bodhisattva. One becomes a superior being. Yeah. And then at that moment, one has achieved the most powerful of the valid cognitions or pramanas, the direct pramana. Tope tsema maris ngusu tsemaji. Right. And so then this is an incontrovertible valid cognition. So that pramana cannot be improved upon, right? So the bodhisattva is an Arya bodhisattva. They still have objects of abandonment that they have to work on diminishing, but that pramana has been brought forth, that valid cognition has been brought forth in its fullest sense.
This one,
so this solid ascertainment through reasoning, then it's good to know exactly what this means. So this was a conversation that hopefully helps you understand that. Then on the basis of developing these understandings, then we can have a much more solid conviction, for example, in why we need to have a spiritual teacher and why it is important to have faith and respect in them. So I'm sorry, I just want to address a mistake I made. So I see what happened here. So Geshe-la was talking about a mental engagement with the object, and then we were shifting to the discussion of that solid ascertainment. So actually I was mistaken. Mental engagement is not what she's given as solid ascertainment through reasoning. That is the pramana itself. So my apologies.
This one,
yeah. So this is also one of the reasons why lamas are sometimes reluctant to teach the way to rely on a spiritual teacher. Geshe-la was remembering the previous Zong Ngöma, the previous Zong Rinpoche. He says, I've been able to go all over the world, to all these different countries in Europe, in America, and they're always requesting, can you teach us the way to rely on the spiritual teacher? But I'm not gonna teach that, because when people hear that, immediately they're gonna think about something rather than the intended meaning. So when some of those foreign students then traveled to India to receive teachings, it was at that point that the previous Zong Rinpoche was comfortable teaching on this topic.
Nin zishu rongi tone chepa kashi toswa kate tanjo chikola kowa lepo machapa chawa matapa golu tenyu che chawa njashi jeba chivu mamba chi shelo meba shana ta che yitsa su che tone chawa matapa gotsa tenbi shandro sezo mashiba shilago matapa tito kawi reshi loro tijaga
tisha. So, likewise, using the example of leisures and freedoms, with respect to meditation on the difficulty in finding a meaningful human rebirth having leisures and freedoms, it would be difficult to explain how to identify one's own leisures and freedoms to someone who does not believe in Buddhism. If someone has not fully understood the topics of leisures and freedoms, then since meditation on death and impermanence is not just about the statement, you are going to die, but in fact has to do with how terrible it would be if one died without having time to practice Dharma, it would be difficult to guide someone without any refuge whatsoever on the topic of impermanence.
Yeah.
So this is really true. Like if you think about it, if you speak to somebody about the 8 leisures and the 10 freedoms, and you are trying to give them an idea about the preciousness of this human rebirth, if they do not sort of have any idea about the Dharma, right, then it is going to be difficult to have the intended understanding of that topic unfold.
Jamala Matiba Nova Yimba, the Kishido, Nochilla, Gami Yaba Shila, Tiji Yaba, Yamba Savi. Tina, the Tuma Shasendo, Dishi, sweet attention, Tetsan, Zinzu, Tanjo, Choamataba, Yasuga, Dungachi, Gila, Lion Suji to Chito, Gendesanger, Nets Shiva, Della Pabi, Shasejano, Jiba, what the Temanze.
Thus, for the time being, it is not important whether a first-time listener to the stages of the path is a refined person or not. It is obvious that it is the guidance for those who consider themselves Buddhists and those who have an affinity for Buddhism. That is why the mind of refuge is explained briefly in this context. Following that is the way to rely on a spiritual teacher, the leisures and freedoms, death and impermanence, the suffering of the lower realms, through an extensive presentation on the mind of refuge, completely covering the nature of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So it's very clear in this contemporary kind of multi-faith setting that it is best to begin with teaching people what they need to become a good person, with teaching people what they need to be able to address and reduce their problems, with teaching people what they need to bring forth a happier mind, right? These would be the starting points in a modern setting.
Da soso masel kibo yundo maya da shalo ne zo mare zo sono to la pa tene da ya ten jawa yare sa da ti so tmo ale ya sho te rawas.
So showing people, right, how happiness is not most dependent upon the outer circumstances that one is experiencing, but how the causes of happiness are those inner causes, and how we can begin to experience that by training our mind, by shifting our way of thinking, right? This is the appropriate place to begin.
Da ya sho de da ti kan ge se se yare te ma ni ja da tes le la gar ji da pe che to ya. Ani wo sho ba ni ji o da se ba te ji da pe so no to ya da ji ka pe tu che shu ren do was.
So this is why Geshe is saying that for him, he thinks that, you know, when you're meeting an audience for the first time, telling them about these 4 close applications of mindfulness, telling them about how to develop qualities of compassion and love, and giving them the tools to be able to develop their patience, right? This is something that is going to be more helpful.
And then on
that basis, you can introduce things like refuge, bodhicitta, the teacher, and so forth. At that point, it is more appropriate.
Yep.
Sonam Gyatso.
Toche Chamber, Kete Zombi, Toche Chamber, Seno Jansi, Lorge, Chi, Reve, this is Seja la Genze. Jogela Matsongkhapa Chime Lonje Rimba Nini Kakonde Noi. Seja Mate, Shaseja Saga Yeto. Maluchu. Lori Chenji Tava, Yuchemo Nosan Di Ga Shase, Shepe Saga Mashui, Longi, Nyoti, Shemanu, Ungi, Suijato, Charlotte, 20 maybe. Sasha Kembo no. No yumbago two metal.
So we are continuing. So for those of you who don't have the text in front of you, you won't see this, but you'll notice that the text goes from the normal font to the bold font. So that means at this point, the 5th Dalai Lama's commentary is aside, and we are, the 14th Dalai Lama's gloss is aside, and we're now going to the 5th Dalai Lama's actual text. So I'm telling you this because you'll notice a difference in tone. So we continue on page 117. This being the case, my exceptional holy guru, the glorious Kunten Pejor Lundup, used the omniscient Sonam Gyatso's Stages of the Path Treatise, Essence of Refined Gold, as a basis and presented an annotated supplement to the 2 stages of the Path Treatise of the Gentle Protector Lama Tsongkhapa, and therefore the mind of refuge is thus clarified within Essence of Refined Gold. Since there is no clarification of the mind of refuge within the greater treatises, such as the middle length and great stages of the path treatises, those charlatans who explain this without having heard the oral lineage or having the knowledge of the practices might boast, but they should acknowledge their faults. Right. So this is basically saying that you understand that the 5th Dalai Lama, Changkya Rölpai Dorjé. Yeah. So we can see from the reference here actually what we're looking at the essence of refined gold, and it's speaking about the minds of refuge and so forth. So now this is where the topic is going to turn. Right. So it's following the sequence of essence of refined gold more than exactly matching the sequence of the middle and great stages of the path. Right. So, therefore, going for refuge from the outset is as said in praise honor of the one worthy of honor. What trouble is there away from which you cannot lead migrating beings? What excellent thing is there that you cannot bestow on the world? There is not another single cause that has not arisen through the power of the Buddha that frees beings from the troubles of cyclic existence in peace, or that affords enjoyment in temporary and ultimate happiness. Yeah. So what is going to lead sentient beings out of the difficulties of samsara, and what is going to lead them towards the actualization of liberation and full enlightenment? This cannot happen in the absence of the power and blessings of a Buddha. And also we should be clear too about the word liberation or moksha. This word is used by many spiritual traditions apart from Buddhism, but when we say liberation or moksha in Buddhism, it has this very specific meaning. So Geshe said some of these non-Buddhist traditions' explanation of moksha is actually very beautiful and encouraging, and he thought that maybe one day we could have a little bit of an exploration of those, but not on this occasion. So the underpinning view in Buddhism, of course, is that what keeps us kind of grounded or circling within samsara is this ignorance grasping at the self. When we are able to bring forth the wisdom mind that defeats the ignorance grasping at the self, it is at that moment, right, that we can begin to experience moksha or liberation.
我当这个丢啊，是我他对他对给的到没啥，他对给的他从这个的知道为其啥，他都没给这些对意思啊。他对从这个出来了嘛，都来嘛，都是的。
So the view that helps us to overcome that ignorance, of course, is the wisdom realizing selflessness. The wisdom realizing selflessness is the very nectar or essence of the Buddha's teaching, but it is not easily understood. And this is why, after the Buddha's enlightenment, he said, I have discovered this nectar-like, this amrit-like dharma, but there are no beings suitable to receive it. And he remained silent, right?
他去用着，他那样的那就的嘛人弄用着都需要嘛的，天现在有着，那都是个年的，年早起说的，家里钱包的，地点这个的，下天我里老不马哇。
So, so we have the sort of more widely proclaimed teaching, the Four Noble Truths, but then along with that, right, the Buddha was also teaching these great vehicle doctrines of how all sentient beings are close to us, how because they are close to us, we should be concerned for their welfare and so forth. And these were not as broadly known.
我当这个这种啊，第是呢，去年写都听说过是公家是就想着写去自什么给吧伊。
So then we switch back to the voice of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. Therefore, whether one is listening to or explaining the Dharma or doing either of the three acts of listening, contemplating, and meditating, they must be conjoined with the spirit of refuge and mind generation.
我呢想着写了就在以前呢，下次我是有从这都去都跟的时候的，老啊没别，像你得什么，同什么，长期吃。查了这菜人话都弄些吃话说给吧，车子做些这些下次吃给吧点吧没得，点了这些人一代吧他都了说别种，主车子人下话你啦，没得别他我学都从嘛都强举说了，下次说呢热心的这人这吧咦。
So we continue. Well, then, what is the way to go for refuge? The three objects of infallible refuge, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, were never taught as refuges for the sake of temporary lesser purposes, such as longevity, wealth, and so forth. For those ends, one can even place their hopes in worldly gods, nagas, and so forth to offer some minor assistance. If one takes refuge in non-Buddhist gods such as Ishvara, Brahma, Vishnu, and so forth, one may... Geshe laughs when I try to pronounce Sanskrit properly. Why do I bother? Vishnu and so forth, one may occasionally accomplish their desired aims. Only if one depends on refuge in the three jewels is one able to attain ultimate liberation in the state of eternal happiness of an omniscient one, which is greater than the temporary happiness of higher rebirth. The purpose of calling the three jewels an infallible refuge and so forth is as it is explained in greater detail in the later section on refuge. Okay, sorry, listen.
我当俺都说跟住死了下身着话，得听到车里话的那面嘛，东西就完了，说把他给都可以啊，我伊那得早起的嘛嘞。
So when we go for refuge to the three jewels, it is not just for the sake of having fewer obstacles, longevity, good health, proper conditions, and so forth. Although certainly relying on the three jewels can help us achieve those things, it is not the ultimate purpose of the reliance.
什么他都没有公布着吧，得早起去的嘛嘞，得早用，人家没就跟住死了下，那没那有拖。
So when we think about the small scope aim to achieve rebirth in the favorable realms of humans and devas, right? Refuge can help with this, but refuge is not required to achieve that outcome. We can do it in the absence of a practice of refuge. Yeah, it's just we're not saying that you don't need refuge or you should leave refuge out of that picture of going to those higher rebirths. We're just saying that it is not absolutely required to achieve those higher rebirths. So we practice refuge in the way that is outlined in the explanations of the great Indian Panditas, such as Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, and Arya Deva, which are saying that if you are one who aspires to ultimate liberation, to moksha, then there is no other refuge one should seek than refuge in the three jewels of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So ultimately, what do we need a refuge from? We need a refuge from the ignorance grasping at the self. That is the most significant thing.
ngaroso da zo de niemo no zo dan zi mari ba de li sha to bi ta sha ji da ma ta ba ta me ai za ke jo so de ko ya re.
So our main enemy, to be clear, is the afflictions. The root of the afflictions is this mistaken mind, the ignorance grasping at the self. Refuge in the three jewels of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha is the only thing that can provide a lasting protection from that.
shilul ta masjin ro sjin na do dangine mundu dangine te sha to ma me ba ne ta da ba de ngaroso kangen no ja ja ke de da za mari pa da ni mo se atre.
So we're not seeking refuge mainly from those outer enemies and difficulties, right? We understand that those outer things are not the main thing, right? We are mainly seeking refuge from the inner difficulties of the afflictions, which are rooted in that ignorance grasping at the self. And these have been our enemies continuously from all of those previous rebirths.
ta ngine pge me wa zo to ke sha ngine che to ke te ta ke jo so chwa ji on ta te zo to yo.
So if we want to get rid of those, we need to go for an ultimate refuge. And the ultimate refuge in this respect is refuge in all three in a complete way: Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha.
ta tel sha san ro zong ji ta pge ta ni ya nyo le che to me na yo. ta sha wa ka she ge ka se ya mo ma to ka she ge la do me ko po le la won da wo chi nga zo to yo.
So some scholars say that even just this mere mind of refuge with this type of conviction in and of itself is enough to secure, a couple of consecutive rebirths in the favorable realms of humans and devas.
ta ro so wa ta ke jo so ne so mo bo wa. ya ti na ke sha ne ke jo so la thong so wa.
Yeah, thong.
Ye ne ni ka nge ti pedel no le la bi ta tu ta wa dong dian de to je chen bi gong bo to ba ni bi ke jo so la me bi sha ni xi sha wa su. So
sorry, I jumped ahead of Geshe-la, so this is going to be repetition for you guys. Only if one depends on refuge in the three jewels is one able to attain ultimate liberation in the state of eternal happiness of an omniscient one. So that's Buddhahood, which is greater than the temporary happiness of higher rebirths. The purpose of calling the three jewels an infallible refuge and so forth is explained in greater detail in the later section on refuge.
Yeah.
So Geshe-la would like to end it here. So for those of you who are following in the text, we are on page 118 now in the second paragraph. So I will mark that so we remember for next time.
So Geshe-la
is saying we too can become a refuge. He's remembering this passage from Shantideva's Bodhisattva Charyavatara, right? Which says that when we bring forth this mind of bodhicitta, we become worthy of prostration from humans and even gods.
Doesn't matter
what you look like or your past story of whether you were seen as good or bad. The moment that mind of bodhicitta is brought forth, one becomes a worthy object of refuge. Yep. Right. Nganso nanglo lagi kunchuk sum drupa. Nganso perna chö kunchuk tobia perna pagpa chik tobna. Okay, this
Yep.
And so Geshe-la said also from the resultant point of refuge, right? If we are to achieve the actualization of one of these three jewels, for example, the Dharma jewel within us, it is not the absolute final refuge, but it is a very high and refined level of refuge. When we bring forth and realize the Dharma jewel within ourselves, right, we also become a source of refuge, a source of true and meaningful assistance to others. So once one brings forth the Dharma jewel within one's mind, then one's a person also becomes an Arya Sangha jewel. One also actualizes the Sangha jewel.
다 되니 다 견줘서 손지게 좀 토소나. 다 샤서 될때 먹기 샤서.
Right. And so then when one achieves the Buddha jewel within oneself, then one is the embodiment of refuge. So one no longer needs to seek refuge externally in the three
데이터 단계
jewels.
소지치소 안노라.
Yeah.
소지치도 소주 바다 다니 샤서. 저기도 마트 손지다니.
Yeah. So that's why in the verse on refuge we say until enlightenment I go for refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, because after you achieve enlightenment you'll no longer have to go for refuge.
야, 단지스 알레. 야, 다 따와디 같이 모이서 따와.
So the view is important, so we should spend a little bit of time on the next text. So we are so recognizing my mother and experiential song on the view. This text, by the way, is freely available and linked on our website, so it's easy to find it.
다 가서 대시에 차와라와스. 야마고 ngotsawa 스레스는 다 맞아 저도 디고레 가디나.
Right.
tumba
Yeah.
tumba 또 땡주니까 지그 조지인바데 하고서나 다때 ngotsawa 첨보레도 생겨 말했어.
So Gyatso said one of the words in the title of this text is recognizing, right? So what are we being taught to recognize in this text? Connected with his comments last week, one of the things we're being taught to recognize is that emptiness is an assisting factor of dependent arising. An understanding of dependent arising is an assisting factor for the understanding of emptiness.
근데 뒤에서와 오탈로 누아 강가로로 피야 고로자데 체마미아바. 로 요가 강가로로 보게 그거요 바티 다 쉬운 거야. 괜히 하고서나.
And on the basis of this understanding, we can defeat all mistaken minds on the basis of understanding that they are not grounded in reason. And in this way, we can understand how through this reason, positive qualities can be developed.
tumba세한테 tumba세한테 하고서나. tum바세한테 하고서나. So
empty, when we talk about emptiness, empty, one way of understanding this is the object is empty of existing in the way that attachment, anger, and the ignorance grasping at the self tell us it exists. It is empty of existing in that way.
Right.
So the object, right, itself, the object of focus, the object itself is their self, others, and so forth. Relatively, they're all there. But it is empty of existing in the way that mistaken appearance tells us it exists.
Yeah.
So it lacks true existence, but yet it is able to exist relatively as a dependent arising, as something that arises in dependence upon other factors. This understanding helps us see how the development and perfection of the method practices of love, compassion, and so forth are very important. So we finished verse 1 last time, so we are now on verse 2. This lunatic child who lost his mother long ago is about to realize by chance what he has not recognized. She has been with him all along.
So the
old mother, right, we see that the author, right, he is thinking about in one aspect, he's thinking about the person of his old mother, right, who's been with him since he was a child. Yeah. So most of us, not everybody, but most of us have had that experience, right? Yeah. Right. So on the other hand, though, this mother is also a personification in the text of profound emptiness.
파리고 또니 야라레.
So that emptiness has been with us all along, yet we haven't been able to experience happiness, right? We have been going, komasung kene, yangersun komasung kene.
나로서 쉐와 도마 메바니 나로서 요하러와스.
Kale, yep.
때도 저게 자꾸만 깨자래. 요하레스.
Yep.
저기 도마니 되고 요용아 토 아니 월 요하러와스.
Yes, yeah.
이나요. 될 주도 마체네 파리모다고 가디기나. 소노 마도 야야레스.
So what this is saying is that we have continued from rebirth to rebirth. We've taken many physical mothers, but this emptiness of the mind, that mother that has been with us from all of those countless rebirths from now, we have not been able to recognize it. And so for this reason, we have not been able to achieve happiness.
보기 주시간 아말라소나. 근데 아말라 때문에 소설 대시라요 말아와스. 대도지바 차대 단답받은 가서.
So we can think of ourselves in this aspect, using the analogy of an orphan who was separated and is hence not able to recognize his or her mother and therefore not able to enjoy the happiness that she would provide.
다 버준용바드 설에서나 단단한서 샘 짜케데레스 또 많이 짜케데.
Right.
많이서 간디지 요메 소노도 계세지요 알아와스. 대 버주데레스 보게데.
Pugudi. And so here the child, we can think, so the mother in the spiritual sense is the emptiness of the mind. The child is the practitioner who is looking for their mother, who is seeking this emptiness.
그래서 다 단다. 예.
Yeah.
버주 짜케 세대도 세게 또 많이 돼. 또 아니 뭘 요하러와. 파셔도 녀도라고 요하레스.
So the ironic thing here is that this practitioner, their mind, which is seeking out their mother, is abiding very close to the emptiness of that mind, which is the mother that they're looking for.
다 단단한서 어제 지제와 시기 요아이자 뭐 실라케라고.
Yeah.
뭐 마시바데 실라케.
Yeah, Shila
실라케서 실도 아니고.
Right.
세게 또 많이 돼. 다 라야도 아니고.
Right. So she's been with him all along. He's not yet recognized it. This is pointing to the fact that the emptiness of the mind that we are seeking is very, very close by, right? We're in close proximity to it.
어떤데 그도와스. 어다 된다 됐으게 데려와서나 다 뭐시소나.
Yeah.
다고 보겠니까도 강가 다두게 대신 용사가 다고 시대에서 자치 못 쓰고 요레스.
If by chance they are able to realize that, they are able to come to this recognition of their mother, then they will be able to unfold the causes of both temporary and ultimate happiness. They will be able to be of true benefit to others. Okay, so Geshe said just the first line of the third verse before we go to questions. Yeah. Sorry. Okay, sorry. Yeah, inji gorim tits chupare nipati. So, okay, just going to warn you, the order of the lines don't match up in Tibetan and English. So we're actually starting with the second line in English. I haven't lost my marbles. It's actually the second line, which is first in the Tibetan. Quietly spoken by my brother, dependent arising.
This one?
Yeah.
다 단다 걸어 좀 봐보 걸어 사치 모레도 왔어. 걸어로 와서 오색이 되라 때네.
Yeah. 하고선.
또 많이 돼.
Yeah.
가발라 때는 와서 세나 빈자 gemba.
Right. So the author's saying, I have recognized the mother. I have recognized emptiness. How then have you been able to recognize emptiness? My brother helped me. And the brother here is a personification of dependent arising.
빈자 gemba 슬라 때는 와서 땡줄라 때는 와서.
Yeah. So on the basis of who were you able to recognize your mother? On the basis of that understanding of dependent arising.
다 땡주 때 빈자 보세요. 땡아조 이제 미지 디골까지 더.
So remember, dependent arising, very important. It is known as the king of reasonings. So therefore, very important for us to engage with. Loso.
다때 가르라서. 제고 셰베칼 땡주 다 할레비까 뭐 누가 셰베칼 주도시라 제이요 말레스.
So when we're doing analytical meditation, actually, the emphasis on dependent arising is very significant. But as we start to go towards a placement meditation on emptiness, we will not be emphasizing it. Because with that placement meditation on emptiness, you're trying to get that single-pointed focus, and trying to bring dependent arising into the picture could cause one to lose that single-pointedness. But when you're engaged in analytical meditation, right, you can bring dependent arising into the picture as often as you like, because that analysis is kind of the cycle of going through the various reasonings. Yeah. So the brother, so we want to find our mother, and we need to seek the help of our brother. Who is our brother? Our brother is dependent arising. So thank you very much. Then, with a mind lifted up in joy, let us dedicate the merits. Just give me a moment. So, of course, folks, if you need to get on with your day after the dedication, please do. If you want to stick around for Q&A, you're welcome to.
Changkya Rinpoche Maje Banam Jejuraji Chewa Nyamba Meba Yang Gone Gondu Bewa Shu Tongni Dawa Rinpoche Maje Banam Jejuraji Chewa Nyamba Meba Yang Gone Gondu Bewa Shu Jambe Pao Jidar Gyamba Kundu Zambo Deyan Dejende Deda Kungi Jesu Dalo Chir Gewa Deda Tamje Ratungo Tusu Shebe Gewa Tamje Gi Ngowa Gangla Chodu Ngabade Dagi Gewe Tsawa Dikungyong Zambo Choji Ratungo Yi Gangri Rawe Korwe Shinkandir Pendang Dewa Malu Jungwe Ne Chenre Ziwan Tenzin Gyatso Yi Shape Site Badu Tenjo
So we will open the floor for questions. If there's anyone on Zoom, if you'd like to go ahead.
Martha had a question in the chat. Martha, would you like to read it, or would you like me to?
You read it, please.
Okay, sure. This came in around the time when Geshe-la was talking about moksha and higher rebirth. So the question is there a possibility that there is another path other than taking refuge in the three divine jewels that allows one to achieve liberation?
Thank you, Marta and Ryan, for reading the question. Nganso kandeslaw gore tarpa tobiala roa kunchuk sum ma tempegi drolam chikyores tarpa tobgana. Right. So Geshe said, according to our view, so that's according to the Buddhist view, no. It's not possible to achieve liberation without that.
Yeah, can you sell a matemba tawata yo martemagida?
Yeah. Yeah.
Tale to tabatopala ale Dumaningesa to Gare. Dumaningesa to Tobalata can you sell that in the Tia?
And the reason for this is that if we want to be able to be liberated, we need to be completely free from the afflictions. If we want to be completely free from the afflictions, we need to have a direct realization of emptiness. If we wish to achieve a direct realization of emptiness, we're going to need to have the assistance of the three jewels. So the thing too is also, if you don't actualize the Dharma jewel, so until we actualize the Dharma jewel ourselves as well, until we actualize the Dharma jewel ourselves, we will not be able to achieve liberation. So I think we'll go to. Oh, sorry, Ryan. Go ahead. I do see
think
a couple
Bridget
of
had her
hands.
hand up next.
Yeah, go ahead.
This one, Kitawale.
Thank you. Geshe-la, I was wondering what you meant last week by talking about foundation of liberation of stainless prayers.
Brigitte, I'm really sorry. Your sound is cutting out, so I actually can't hear your question.
Okay, I was wondering what Geshe-la meant
Yeah.
last week when he spoke about the foundation of the liberation, about stainless prayers.
Stainless prayers. I got you. Okay, yeah. Thank you, Brigitte. Thanks for saying it again. Yeah, you cut out for some reason. I'm not sure why. Nganso kasang nganso milu tobia gichedi roa munlam jima mepa gogires. Munlam jima mepa sena karires.
Melo Tama Mebasan. Melo Tama Mebe Toja.
Yeah.
Me that Melo Tama Mebasan kind of secretary. Tamelo Tama Mebasena, the next document. Melo Tama Mebasena. That Garsix, Tamelo Tama Mebasan, Yandal never shared what the niggas had on Mandela.
Ale. Right. So Geshe said in this case, the stainless prayers would be the prayer to may I achieve this human rebirth in the future, right? Because this is one of the three things you need to achieve that human rebirth. May I achieve this human rebirth in the future. And it is stainless because the prayer is not at all connected with harming others or with trying to achieve an advantage over others.
Mato Kashi Tatani yards, then they are his. Oh, Tangam to Chimbolato, Chimboshi, Yenda, never so there's no.
Because there may be people who are aiming for a higher rebirth in the human or deva realms, thinking, may I be reborn as a powerful human being so that I can seek revenge on this person, so that I can be in a situation over this person and so forth. Then it's no longer stainless because of that motivation. Yeah, how does that? So actually, Geshe said he's remembering, if you think about this image of the wheel of existence of the 12 links, right? Holding that wheel is this sort of monster-looking demon, like kind of a scary guy. He is actually said to be somebody who had very powerful positive karma, but they made tainted prayers rather than stainless, which ended up with him taking this rebirth as the guy holding the wheel, basically. So there's a story related to that. Right. So some people say, and Geshe said, a lot of Tibetans have this view, right, that this figure holding the wheel of existence has just kind of always been stuck there. But actually, this is not the case. He's there because of a very specific cause. Yeah. So there's some stories related to that, which I guess we're going to check those and maybe get back to you on that. So what's the best, the ideal stainless prayer that one could bring forth? You would bring forth the idea that may I be reborn in the higher realms as a human beings or a deva so that I can continuously bring benefit to others. This is like the best possible stainless prayer. But even without that sort of very high view, if there is a prayer which is not completely tainted by self-cherishing, it would qualify as a stainless prayer. So, thinking to achieve that, to contribute to the happiness of oneself and others, for this reason may I be reborn in the human or deva realms, this would be another example of a stainless prayer.
Thank you, Geshe-la.
Okay, thanks, Brigitte. So I see both Marjorie and Annie, so I'm not sure who is next, but whoever would like to go.
I think Annie's next.
Is Annie next? Go ahead, Annie. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Geshe-la was talking about when to examine our own self-grasping, to develop the wisdom of selflessness. and that to look at the emptiness of I. So does that mean that the emptiness of I is an aspect of selflessness? And what does selflessness actually mean? Does it encompass more?
Okay, yep, I think I gotcha. Dene nguma nganso kandesla gore tompani ngune tobiola roa nganso tambo dangzen chik samlo tango gore duas roa dangzen di kandes chikyores. Dene nganso dangzen gi nyambo samlo tango gore duas nganso dangzen gi nyambo labna roa dagme gitawa di dangzengi nyambo reduas ine dijela nganso kandesla gore dag seria digi tompani kola samlo tango gore duas dag me sena nganso dagi tompa di chikpores dag me tets gyatso rebesa
no me gyatso rebesa na meda me nga
yeah
So
generally, selflessness is a broader category, as you kind of hinted at. But when we're approaching it, if we try to understand the selflessness of our I,
this one,
yeah. Right. So if you understand the selflessness of the I or yourself, that can be carried over to other things. The reason that we start with trying to understand the selflessness of the I, or the emptiness of the self, we could also say, is because this I, this self, is something that is always together with us. And this kind of apprehension and grasping at the self is something that is together with us day and night.
This one,
Ale de nga seri de gitompani hakona
tene ta phimbo kawat na kumbango kangal tumbani yara was
yeah
o kangangol ngama no jikale yo amar ta lela gajachi was.
So the trick is, if you can apprehend the selflessness of the I, or the emptiness of the self, following from that, it is very easy to then contemplate and identify the emptiness of the other skandhas, of all 5 aggregates, and then following this, to see the emptiness of inherent existence of any object. And why is that? It's because the object of negation for the emptiness of the self is the same as the object of negation for the emptiness of phenomena, for the selflessness of phenomena, pardon me.
Papa la Japan no ni po kenjata wo ko ten kenjata wo yi se chi tin de tumbani racha sona
Yeah.
Kanga to no gre na bana chilare ten te ngazo teru mares.
Ale losa.
Kanga to go mare ter kale yo mares.
All right.
Keba shegedon lila wa ko yungres.
So Aryadeva, in his 400 stanzas text, he says that once the emptiness of one thing is realized, the emptiness of all is realized. Later scholars says that that's not exactly the way it unfolds, but once you realize the emptiness of that one thing, then as you direct your attention to the other things, you are able to come to an understanding of their emptiness without great difficulty. Excuse me. Geshe said it would be just like focusing our attention like from here to looking at another object in the room. It would be no more difficult than that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome, Annie. But generally, you're correct, right? That selflessness is a very broad category because all phenomena, all objects are empty and in this way are selfless. So yes, it is a very broad category. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Annie. Marjorie, go ahead.
Hi, this might be a little bit related. My question was, why is the main reason that the mental continuum is not considered a self reason to be because of its lack of inherent existence, or that it's dependently arisen? Is that the main argument?
The mental continuum, right?
The mental continuum, yes.
Nganso semgi gyudi rua dag sergi omares kari chene semgi gyudi dagla tugi mares karinsena ke chikmares karinsena mutune gi gyun dabochikres tenjung dabochikres gyumsen kareyeresa.
세그 저때 다 Lama tobi jese karesena. Yuna se rapika jotere. Se chamika joteres.
Yeah, so the first, Geshe said the first part to answer Marjorie's question has to be if the mental continuum is the self, which of the mental continuum is the self? The coarser mental continuum or the subtle mental continuum? So you start to run into a problem there.
세 rapika jote 고자 레자라바 이나는 코니 쿠비카 고자 메자라비
If we say that the coarse mental continuum is the self and you're saying, okay, I'm holding that view, what about when you fall asleep and that coarse mental continuum is no longer there? Yeah. Does the self just disappear? Like, especially think about that really deep, dreamless sleep, right? Does the self just disappear because the coarse mental continuum is no longer there?
다 세 참미까 저때 고자래 잘라와 이나나
Yeah.
단다 고자들까 전에 마 제금에 잘라 가레스.
Yeah. So, okay, you might say, okay, I accept that. Then it is the subtle mental continuum which is the self. But nganso kandes, nganso ni makupe kabla lega chegyoma.
단다 전에 내가 제금 매 잘라 가테 라토 마로 나도 내가 제기하러was.
But then, because like, especially now in our moments of waking hours, right, the subtle mental continuum is not really functioning. It is the coarse mental continuum which is functioning. So then when the coarse mental continuum is predominant, would you say the self is no longer there? So that would be the next line of reasoning.
소소 동근도 제 동근도 강갔다 동근도 이나 세 참미가 저때 내가 전제 도요 만한다.
Yeah, based upon this coarse mental continuum, we have a sense of ourselves talking and so forth. We have a sense of the other people who we are perceiving listening. And the subtle mental continuum doesn't seem to be active or doing anything at all. But if you say that subtle mental continuum is the I no longer there?
세 참은데 니카도리 와서요. 그래서 많이 했지마 디카도 잘로 파테스
Minji betigleро.
어디 놀러라.
Yeah.
많이 놀러라.
So the extremely subtle mind, right, also has a point of identification, which is relatively towards the center of our body at about the heart level, and it abides in the indestructible drop at the heart.
내가 친다 류요도는 단는 니까지도 도요 말했어.
And it is said that the prana or the winds, especially in moments like this when we're awake, they can't even penetrate that indestructible drop at all. So because our prana cannot penetrate this indestructible drop and access the subtlest level of the mind, the subtlest level of the mind is dormant. And if we were to say that the self is the subtlest level of the mind, then the self would be sort of dormant and inactive, but we can see this is not the case. Yeah. So it is for these kind of reasons that we can't say that the self or the I is that mental continuum, because then you get into the problem of which mental continuum and what instance. We can't say the I or the self is the mind. Neither can we say the I or the self is the mental continuum for this reason. Nga sere di dang sem gi gyun. Ngai gyun. Right. But the self and the continuum of the self and the mind and the mental continuum are things that have been with us from countless rebirths until the present moment, and they will always be with us. The self and the mind are inseparable from their corresponding continuums. Did that answer you, Marjorie? Don't know if
Yes, it did, and it's a good fodder for my analytical meditation.
Yeah. 제공 조탕 야보치 그래도. Yeah. Yes, so Geshe said this is exactly the type of question where you want to do an analytical meditation. Because it will help us understand this, but it will also understand how they also arise in dependence upon each other, right? Yeah. So Geshe doesn't see any more hands. I don't see any more hands either. So
there's one more in the chat.
Oh yes, Ryan, go ahead.
Rebecca.
Yep.
Rebecca asks, I thought the mother figure was supposed to help us with understanding love, compassion, and bodhicitta.
Right.
Today's teaching seemed to indicate that the mother figure is emptiness of the mind.
Yeah.
For someone who does not have a mother figure, how are we supposed to proceed with these ideas?
Yes, yes. Nganso ama seria dirwa. Ama nganso namgin ama la tene jampa dang ningje dang tap gine so denso samlo tango gire duas rwa. Senjin ta chatsama ama res la gire dua rwa. Yine jung digi nang lola ama sena semgi tompani res rwa. Tene dites min jawa dabochik. Ane mi Kandis lagore nganso ama nguzin dabochik sogures yine ama dang jawa sheda megen samso dinso kandis pesha tangores chua ni dua.
Mare. Yed. Noji pateta. Ama de shirares.
Yeah.
So
So Geshe-la said that actually within the sutras, we have the personification of both father and mother. So father is usually method, mother is actually usually wisdom. Nga chana ko senshin chatsonga ama nangshin samlotani dela tene ningje kia kodi true. Yeah. But I was saying to Geshe-la that I think what Rebecca may be pointing to, and she can jump in if I'm incorrect, is that when we cultivate compassion, we do that on the basis of the 7-point cause and effect and seeing all beings as being like our mother, right?
Right.
Yeah. Right. Yep. Hagusan. Right. So the reason for this, though, younger Sundan Gotong Sungonda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ama de shira to kandis and Davigares.
Yep.
Hakosara.
Yep.
Ama latene rin ramadamai, Jabizi,
Yep.
Josegri, Jagal rin ramadayara.
Yep. So why is the mother called wisdom or personified as wisdom in the sutras? We can think of the mother as the birth mother who, in the time of ancient India, she would determine whether we are born as a Brahmin, whether we are born as a king, whether we are born as a minister, kind of our station in life. Yeah. Yeah.
That's when you get them, but they pay them what you go eyes. Only the read Chimochi do Pugichi. Oh, Yenda Gizi, the Pugichi, Pugimadavani.
Ale. Loso. Rick Mendrawani.
Papa Mandavani.
Ale. Loso. Yep.
Puginila Tenetano, loving the Papa to make Karachi Bushuan was.
Ale. Dites gelwa dapo chagires karinsana amala tenetoa yoda mes drogires then conso pala chik mawres chik tores pet gelwa dapo chatsasun. Don't that mean do? Sorry. It's total cancellation of what was said before. I'm totally confused.
I don't get that, basically.
Totally confused.
No.
Okay, so you're asking what was happening, so maybe I should tell you, because people are wondering what's going on. So Geshe was saying, yes, so our mother determines whether we're born as a Brahmin, whether we're born as a king,
so it's a matrilineal society.
And then Geshe... Hold on a second. So then Geshe said, for example, Vasubandhu and Asanga's mother, she wanted to have a son who was born into a high caste and a son who was born into a low caste. So she had a different father for each of her sons. So then I'm saying to Geshe, then you're just canceling out what you just said. Because the mother, you said, determines what their position in life is. So that's why I got confused. Listen.
Yeah. Baba Chima to Mana.
Yep.
Chima to call Raga Marawa.
Loso.
Baba Rim Mandawani.
Yep.
Hakuson, Lovi Papa to Meji.
Yeah.
It doesn't get it, I don't think.
Yeah.
Then the Amachila Tene Pugri Ramadashi talking to us.
Yes. Okay.
This
Yes.
Yeah. This one.
Yeah. Haguson.
Peter Noji to be Shira. Yeti Papa. Akosara, Rujaga Papa. Joji Semi Papa to Toyores.
Ale. Loso. Yeah.
I'm a page of
Yeah.
Shira.
Yeah. Haguson.
Motella.
Yeah. So now I think I'm coming to an understanding. I was totally confused. So Geshe says he's going to explain it a different way. I think now it's much clearer. So the wisdom realizing emptiness, why is this the mother? Because the wisdom realizing the emptiness is the mother of all realization. Yeah, this is much clearer. So one can become, based upon a realization of emptiness, a hearer, a solitary realizer, any type of Arya being.
This one, there is a mate shiradundaware.
So for this reason, in the sutras, then, the mother is always the wisdom.
This one,
the father is compared to method. Why is this the case? Yep. Because the father is not responsible for being born as any kind of human being in the way that the mother can. In other words, you can be reborn as any caste, as any sort of position in life from a mother. But the father can only determine one particular position in life. So we're going to this system of Varna, right?
This one,
So with the method practices of love, compassion, and bodhicitta, one has the realization of emptiness, but one can only practice the bodhisattva path, right? So the realization of emptiness is the mother that can give rise to any spiritual being. The father method practices of compassion and love determine that one will be a bodhisattva who is practicing emptiness. So this is why the Prajna Paramita, or Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, are known as the mother, right? And we speak of wisdom as a mother.
This one,
yeah, so this is why the mother is wisdom. Rebecca, did this answer your question? Is that what you were asking? She's still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
I guess I'm interested in a more specific answer. In other words, I thought that if you didn't have mother and father figures in your life, in your actual birth and growing up, then it was very difficult to understand love, compassion, and bodhicitta, and even the emptiness of the mind. I mean, how were you supposed to get there? And I guess I've always thought that.
Right. Okay. Yes, no, I see. It's another angle to the question. Let me ask this for you. Nganso paladang ama mena, rwa denenganso ninje
mena for sure.
Jampa dang dinso korla samlotangna tets kalikapore duas ane paladang amala megen koronso perna ninje kia gitap dang jampa kia gitap dang yang shirap kia gitap condensed chikyeres karin sana nganso pala amala yena di tap nge pala res
shirap ta tedo nganso ti yang mola pata mata ban de shiba pata ban de shiba nyeda da ban de shiba so so ga ta page ya chen di ga nye za cheju kar zhe yo na de da wo be ja.
I think that's just trying to be too personal.
Yeah, so Geshe was saying that... Oh, sorry, Rebecca, did you want to ask something else?
No.
Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay, good. Sorry, I thought I heard you say something. Anyways, I thought I missed part of your question. But anyway, so what Geshe is saying is that in this case, that's why he says, for example, when you have to see all beings as your mother, as a way of feeling close to beings, as a way of developing that compassion, then you just think of the person closest to you.
Yeah.
Whoever has shown you the greatest kindness.
Children,
And that's why it says in the sutras themselves, see all beings as like your father, like your mother, or like the person who has been kindest to you, right? So there's options. So why is mother the one that seems to be emphasized, or the one that we hear the most, right? There's a reason for that. Yeah. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama says that we choose the mother as the main one in the sutras because you have a lot of, sort of deadbeat dads who get the mom pregnant and go off, or just don't take much responsibility. So that's what His Holiness has said. I'm not saying all dads are deadbeat. I have to quantify that. I'm talking generally, right? Don't want people to get offended. Yeah, so Geshe said in most cases, right? He's not saying in all. In most cases, the mother is the first sort of close contact caregiver, not just with human beings, but with animals too, right? Most animals, not all, but most, the mother is the main one. Yep. Yeah, yeah. Ale, karistaya? Para karistaya kibuchenikus? O ko drama mboso ne. Yeah, yeah. Right. So Geshe was saying also that, you know, he was remembering that, like, as a child, when he would cry, right, that the father just kind of would just like leave him there to cry and not want to pay attention, but his mother couldn't bear the sound, right? So she would like pick him up and try to move him up and down like a train or like an airplane and try to calm him. So he had that memory, right, in his own life. Yeah. But Geshe says he says we're explaining according to a balance of circumstances. He's not saying that all fathers are one way or all mothers are another way. We're just saying, you know, in some circumstances. Yeah. There's lots of, you know, fathers who take more responsibility for the children than the mother in some cases, but we're just talking about a balance of cases, right? Yeah. So it's the main one, but that's not all circumstances are like that. There's some variation. But Geshe was saying, like, Rebecca, he thinks the answer to this is just, you know, even in the absence of both of those figures, you still have someone who's close to you in your life, someone who has shown you the most kindness and so forth. So in the case of developing love and compassion, for example, if the person just takes whoever has shown them the most kindness and goes through the various lines of reasoning how all sentient beings have perhaps shown them a similar kindness, that will be enough of the same basis to develop the love and compassion as someone who had a close relationship with their parents. Yeah. And the main also understanding that we're trying to get to is that when we reach out our concern to include more and more people, we aren't losing anything from that. We only have something to gain. So that understanding is really important. Did that cover your question, Rebecca?
Yes, thank you.
It did. Okay. All right. So I think Geshe says we shall leave it here. So yeah, so it doesn't look like there's more questions. Unless, maybe there is. I see Ryan again. And we're good? Okay, all right. So thank you, everybody. We will be back next Sunday. And thank you for the questions, everyone. It always makes it fun. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Ryan.